A survey from the American Psychological Association revealed that suicide intervention was among the most stressful of all mental health interventions. Welcome to the ICISF Quick Tips series. This installment is titled Quick Tips for Effective Suicide Intervention. Dr. Victor Welzant is a clinical psychologist and Director of Education for the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. Dr. Welzant, do you agree with the finding of the APA survey?
I think for many people who are intervening, whether you're a peer supporter or mental health professional, unless you're doing it really frequently, and even then, the stakes are high. No one wants to harm anyone. We all get into this to help people. And suicide is one of the most sort of high risk and frankly frightening for some interventionists to do. So I definitely agree with the survey.
What quick tips can you share that may make suicide intervention less stressful and hopefully more effective?
Number one, I would say, knowing what resources that are in your community before you go to intervene is really important. Suicide intervention is often thought of as a team approach. It's not just relying on one person. So knowing what local crisis centers exist, how to access them, crisis teams, your peer support teams, clinicians on your team, mental health resources, the hotlines, knowing what's available that you can offer people helps you walk in feeling prepared. I think the second thing is to really listen. Most intervention around suicide really involves developing a rapport and letting people tell you what the stresses are that are driving this particular crisis. Using all your active listening skills, reflecting back, and validating their pain is really important. The third thing, that we really emphasize is take all communication about suicide seriously. Even if people say it in a joking way, we want to be really clear that the best thing we can do is be very direct and ask the question about suicide very directly. I know you just made a joke, but are you thinking about killing yourself? Not being afraid to use the language. We know that it's a myth that if you say it to someone who's not thinking about it, you'll put the idea in their mind. We know that's not true. And being willing to listen and ask the questions about suicide are a key tip. Another is to know some of the risk factors, and this is where training comes into play. If you're going to be intervening as part of a peer support team or in the community, getting some training in suicide intervention is crucial, and this has really been emphasized, particularly in the emergency services. Many teams are looking at suicide intervention training, and many agencies are looking at suicide prevention training. That's really important. And remember, just some of those key indicators are the person is talking about wanting to kill themselves. They may be thinking about a plan or a specific method. They may have taken action to acquire that method. So for example, someone's talking to you and they've mentioned overdosing, and then they let you know that they have pills available to do that. Knowing what those key indicators are, and there's a few others, mental states like hopelessness, desperation, all of those, you can really assess as you talk to someone. You can ask those questions very directly. And then the fourth, I think, important thing is knowing what to do next. And this is where basic crisis intervention skills, problem solving, really incredibly helpful. Once you clarify that a person is suicidal, then the next step really involves how do we get that person from where we are right now to a professional evaluation if that's not your role. And that's a problem-solving process, really. How do we help that person connect with the professional resources they need? Or how do we help them come up with a short-term plan for managing the crisis right now as they solve the longer-term issues that got them to this point? And lots of times that involves the referral to a mental health professional. What also is really important for us as interventionists is not to feel like we have to do this by ourselves. On a couple of the peer support teams I work with, when we know we're going to be talking to someone who's suicidal, we don't just send out one peer, we'll send out two. There may just be one in the room, but there's also one nearby who can help with other things like getting resources, or if the situation really requires emergency intervention, then that second peer can be tremendously helpful. So again, don't be doing this by yourself. I think it's a really important point to remember that when you intervene, the goal of that is really to help the person stabilize their reaction to what's going on. It's not to cure them. It's not to treat them in one session that they're no longer going to be suicidal. For some people, suicide is sort of a chronic struggle. They live with that sometimes for long periods of time. The goal is really to help them in the short term stabilize, delay acting. And that's a key principle, is delay taking action on suicidal impulses, suicidal thoughts, until you have time to really work through the problems that are driving you to be suicidal. You can think of it as a very short-term goal, then connecting the person with other resources, whether it's mental health or being in a protected setting, where they can work on those other issues and then revisit where they're at with suicide in kind of an ongoing way. When people are in that mindset where they're acutely suicidal, suicide may seem like the only or the best solution to the problems. Our job is to slow the process down and delay acting so that they can see there are other possible solutions. And as a final note, it's important to point out that there is a national resource that's relatively new, the 988 hotline. People can access that hotline when they are suicidal or experiencing a crisis of any type, and they'll be routed to the nearest crisis center. This is a 24/7 service, and it's available anywhere in the nation. So I just wanted to mention that as one additional resource we can be offering people who are in crisis.
Thank you, Dr. Welzant. Today's takeaways are: know all available resources before arriving at the scene. Listen and validate their pain. Always take communication about suicide seriously. Know the risk factors by getting suicide prevention training. Know what to do once you confirm someone is suicidal, and bring additional support with you. To gain knowledge in suicide awareness, you can participate in our upcoming courses: Suicide Awareness, an Introduction for Crisis Responders, and Understanding Suicide, Effective Tools for Prevention, Intervention, and Survivor Support. You can find these courses on our virtual training page at icisf.org/remote-learning for information and to register. We offer these courses on a rolling basis. You can also view our Crisis Resource Library, which offers a variety of handouts and videos at icisf.org. Thank you for listening to this episode of the ICISF Quick Tips series.